She just wanted to attend her son's celebration, but they looked at her like a homeless intruder. One man shouted, "Someone give her a mop," never realizing she was the mother of the CEO behind the $999 million deal. What happened minutes later turned the room silent. Martha Langford had never liked crowds or extravagance. She cherished stillness, the scent of old books and libraries, her potted plants by the kitchen window, and the quiet mornings when she made herself a cup of coffee. But tonight, she stood in front of one of Manhattan's most luxurious hotels, wearing a pale blue dress she only saved for the most important occasions, clutching a small black handbag and an invitation printed in silver ink. Langford Technologies signing Gala. That invitation had arrived at her doorstep a week earlier. It was sent by her own son, Damian Langford, the man the American media called the tech prodigy or CEO of the 21st century. But to Martha, Damian was still the little boy who went to public school, who stuffed sandwiches into his bag because he thought his mother hadn't packed enough food, who once cried when someone told him, "Black boys shouldn't study robotics." She was proud of her son, but she had never used his success as a source of pride for herself. As she entered the grand lobby, Martha felt as though she had stepped into a world that was never meant for her. Men in sleek tuxedos, women in glittering gowns, laughter that felt half sophisticated, half performative. No one looked at her. No one asked her name. They moved past her as though she were invisible. She took a deep breath, adjusted her shawl, and moved toward the reception table. But before she reached it, a young blonde woman blocked her path. A champagne flute in one hand, a mechanical smile on her lips. "Ma'am, the staff entrance is in the back. This way, please." The woman gestured dismissively without taking a good look at Martha. Martha paused. "I have an invitation," she said softly, but no one paid attention. Around her, curious eyes began to gather, not in recognition, but in condescension. One man sneered, "She walked into the high-class gala by mistake." Then came the breaking point. A man near the buffet shouted, "My phone just vanished. Someone check that lady's purse." A group turned to look at her in unison. Martha instinctively hugged her handbag closer. Not out of guilt, but out of pain. She had witnessed this scene too many times in her life. She never thought it would be her turn. Not tonight. Not on the night her son was to shine. A security guard approached, voice stiff, but trying to remain polite. "Ma'am, if your name is not on the list, I'll have to ask you to leave. This is a private event." Martha didn't argue. She simply nodded and walked toward a dim hallway near the emergency exit. That was when her hands began to tremble, not from fear, but from the quiet shame invading every cell of her being. She reached for her phone. Her aged fingers moved slowly, but all she needed was one contact. When the call connected, she didn't cry. She didn't stutter. She simply said, "Son, cancel the deal." Martha remained in the hallway, away from the stairs, gripping her handbag tightly. She assumed it would take Damian some time to arrive. But within 10 minutes, the grand ballroom doors swung open, and there he was, Damian Langford. His black suit seemed to draw all the light out of the room, and his eyes, scanning the space, bore not a hint of a smile. The room fell instantly quiet. Everyone recognized him. The CEO of Langford Technologies. The youngest billionaire ever to take a company public on NASDAQ. No one knew why he arrived early. No one understood the cold tension in his face. He offered no greetings, no handshakes. He walked straight through the rows of chairs, past the astonished investors, his steps directed toward the hallway where Martha stood alone. From afar, Damian saw his mother, standing quietly, holding her purse as though it was the only protection left. He quickened his pace. But the room still didn't grasp the connection. They didn't know who she was. All they saw was a powerful man walking directly to a nameless woman. Before he reached her, another staff member, having overheard the earlier rumors, approached Martha and whispered, "Ma'am, if you're looking for the restroom, the service corridor is in the back." He didn't even look her in the eye. A man in a brown suit, one of the main investors from Boston, muttered sarcastically, "If she took that guy's phone, maybe she's trying to sneak out now." At that moment, Damian reached his mother. He said nothing. He simply wrapped his arms around her. The entire room froze. Immediately, the energy changed. A young woman in a red dress stammered, "Wait, is that his mother?" One foreign investor was just about to blurt out an apology when Damian turned around, as sharp as ice. He stood tall in the middle of the room, pulled out his phone. Everyone thought he might call security or a coordinator. But instead, he dialed a familiar number and spoke loud enough for all to hear. "Freeze everything. We're not signing with this group." A shockwave rippled through the room. Panic flashed across several faces. One of the finance directors stepped forward, whispering urgently, "Damien, this is a global event. The media's watching." Damien locked eyes with him. "Good. Let them see." He turned to his mother. "I'm sorry you had to go through this." Martha shook her head gently. "I'm fine. I'm just sorry you ever believed you could trust them." One of the lead investors stepped forward with a rehearsed smile. "Mr. Langford, we truly apologize for the small misunderstanding tonight." "Misunderstanding?" Damien raised an eyebrow. "Someone loses a phone and blames my mother. She doesn't carry a luxury handbag, so you assume she's staff. She has dark skin, so you think she doesn't belong here. That's not a misunderstanding. That's your character." He paused, scanning the crowd, then said, "And I don't do business with people of that character." No one dared say another word. They left the hotel just as night fell over New York. There was no rain, but the wind carried the sting of autumn's arrival. Damien guided his mother to the waiting black SUV. No one dared see them off. Those who had strutted into the lobby earlier with prideful smiles now stood frozen, unable to speak. Inside the car, Martha sat quietly, staring out the window. She didn't cry. She wasn't angry. But her eyes seemed deeper, heavier than usual, silently observing the city her son once called the land of opportunity. Damien sat beside her, phone in hand. He wasn't actively searching for anything. He simply opened a news app, out of habit. But the first headline that popped up made his fingers stop cold. CEO Langford's mother turned away at $999 million Gala. Investors stunned by her real identity. He scrolled further. Another article. A blue dress, a mother, and a deal that wasn't. What really happened last night? He opened Twitter. In the search bar, typing just Langford revealed the top suggestion. Langford's mother. Disrespect at its peak? There were no videos. No leaked footage. But the story had already taken root, built not by scandal, but by truth. Several financial journalists who had been invited to the event had posted about it on their own pages. No sensationalism. No exaggeration. Just facts, plain, clear, and sharp. Damien turned his phone slightly, thinking to show his mother. But she gently shook her head. "No need, son. I've lived long enough to know the difference between when someone truly sees you and when they just look at you to judge." He froze. Her voice carried no blame, no bitterness, only the winded breath of someone who had walked through many storms before. His phone buzzed again. And again. Messages poured in from business partners, celebrities, politicians, an old college professor. All of them said the same thing: "We stand with your decision." At a red light, a young boy selling newspapers darted past their car. In his hand, today's edition of the New York Sentinel. The front page headline read, "She didn't say a word, but now the whole country listens." Damien closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered how, when he was little, every night his mother would say, "You can be as brilliant as you want, son, but always be kind, especially to those nobody notices." Now, his mother had become that very person. And because she said nothing, the whole nation had no choice but to listen. 2 days after the incident in Manhattan, Martha received a phone call from a familiar old number. "Ms. Langford, this is Hazel from the retirement home in Queens. Do you remember me?" Martha smiled gently at the sound of that voice. Of course she remembered. That place was part of her memory, where she used to spend Tuesday afternoons chatting, trimming nails, or simply sitting beside people who had no one left to listen to them. "We heard about what happened at the gala," Hazel said softly. "You handled it with such grace. We're all very proud. Some of the folks here still ask about you." Martha was quiet for a moment before asking, "Is everything okay, Hazel?" There was a short breath, then a hesitant reply. "We're hosting a small talk this Friday afternoon. No press, no cameras. Just a warm little room with a few old souls. Would you come say a few words? Nothing big. Just sit with us." Martha looked out her window, where the sun was beginning to soften over New York's skyline. She nodded, her voice as light as morning dew. "I'll be there." That afternoon, she arrived at the home wearing a beige cardigan and a simple brown skirt. No fancy car, no security detail. Just her, and a homemade apple pie in a paper box. The room where the gathering took place was warm in every sense. It smelled of tea, medicine, and memory. Around 20 seniors sat on armchairs, some dozing off, some leaning on canes, some looking at Martha like they were seeing an old friend come home. There was no stage, no microphone, just a wooden chair placed in the middle of a circle. Martha sat down and smiled. I didn't come here to teach anyone anything, she said gently. I just wanted to sit with people who've walked through life with real feet, not designer shoes, not fame, just kindness. Someone asked, "Are you angry with them? The people from that night?" Martha shook her head. I'm not angry, because I didn't carry them in my heart. I only keep space for people who look into someone's eyes and see a human being. Another woman added, My granddaughter read about you. She said you're the woman who made a nation pause and think. Martha laughed softly. All I did was stay silent. And if someone found meaning in that silence, maybe the meaning was already within them all along. The gathering didn't last long, just over an hour. But when she stood to leave, everyone stood with her. Without instruction, they held hands, as if to remind each other that, even when society renders you invisible, you are still here, and still worthy of being heard. On the ride home, Martha felt her heart as light as the first time Damien called her mama. Not because she was invited, but because she was remembered. That night, after dinner, with no meeting scheduled and no press interviews pending, Damien drove his mother back to his own apartment, a penthouse on the west side of Central Park. He rarely invited anyone into that space. But tonight, he didn't want her to be anywhere else. The apartment was quiet. No noise, no glowing screens. Damien poured 2 cups of ginger tea, placed one before his mother, then sat across from her. They didn't speak for a few minutes. Only the ticking of the wall clock filled the air. Martha was the one to break the silence. When you were in kindergarten, you said you'd build me a big house one day. Damien chuckled softly. And I did, but I never really let you stay too long. Why is that? She asked gently. Damien wrapped his hands around the warm mug, eyes fixed on the floor. Then, slowly, he answered. Because I was ashamed. The air seemed to thicken. Martha said nothing. No anger. She just waited. Not ashamed of you, he continued, voice unsteady. Ashamed because I knew you did everything, worked night shifts as a nurse, rode freezing buses home, raised me alone, but the world never saw you as someone worth admiring. He lifted his gaze to her. I pushed so hard to prove that a kid like me could rise. But the higher I climbed, the more I assumed you were fine, that you didn't need protecting. Martha remained quiet. A faint smile touched her lips. I truly was fine. No, Mom. Damien shook his head. You were just so good at being strong. I forgot that strength doesn't mean absence of pain. He left his chair and sat beside her. His hand gently found hers, those same hands that once held his through that first winter after his father left. I used to think you were too strong to ever need defending, he whispered. Until that day, when I saw them surround you with their looks, and I realized. I had never protected you. I only learned to stand in front of you, but never between you and the world. Martha didn't cry, but she gripped his hand tightly. If it took you nearly a lifetime to understand that, she said softly, then it was still worth living. They sat side by side, in the silence of people who had walked through too many years. No more explanations. No more apologies. Just honesty. On the table, the tea had gone cold. But their hearts had never been warmer.